July 16th, 1941. Kovrov Arms Factory, Central Russia. Viktor Morozov stands in a machine shop that smells of cutting oil and hot metal. He's 42 years old, hands scarred from 4 decades of working steel. No engineering degree, 3 years of parish school education, that's all. In his hand, a telegram from Moscow, Stalin's orders. Create an anti-tank rifle, from scratch. No blueprints, no prototype to copy. Start with raw steel and your brain. Deadline, 22 days. Viktor looks at the calendar. Today is July 16th. By August 7th, he must deliver working prototypes. Not drawings, not proposals, actual rifles that can penetrate German armor. Behind him, 11 machinists wait. Most are older than Viktor, grey hair, missing fingers from lathe accidents, men who learned their trade before the revolution, when the Tsar still ruled. They're not engineers, they're craftsmen, and they have 22 days to build a weapon that will force Germany to redesign every single tank in its army. The rifle Viktor will create costs less than a machine gun, weighs less than a soldier's full combat load, will be manufactured on the same lathes that wove cloth 3 weeks ago, and it will kill 132 German soldiers at the Battle of Moscow. But the real story isn't about killing. It's about how one uneducated machinist's impossible design forced the entire German military-industrial complex to waste millions of Reichsmarks on steel skirts they called Schürzen, how desperation and genius became the same thing, how simplicity defeated perfection when time was the only resource that mattered. If you want to understand how Soviet desperation created the weapon that changed German tank engineering forever, you're in exactly the right place. This is that story. Viktor Morozov was born in Tula in 1899. Tula, a city whose only export was guns. For 3 centuries, Tula made weapons for Russian armies, muskets for Peter the Great, rifles for Napoleon's defeat, machine guns for the Great War. If you were born in Tula, you worked metal. No exceptions. Viktor's grandfather was a gunsmith. His father was a gunsmith. Viktor would be a gunsmith. This wasn't a choice. It was inheritance. Like brown eyes or the shape of your nose. At 6 years old, Viktor stood in his grandfather's forge behind their house. A small room with a brick furnace and an anvil worn smooth by 100,000 hammer strikes. His job? Work the bellows. Push, pull, push, pull. Feed air to the coals until they glowed white hot, until the iron bar buried in the fire turned the color of honey. Then, his grandfather would pull the bar out with tongs, place it on the anvil, strike it with a hammer that weighed more than Viktor. Clang, clang, clang. Sparks flew like fireflies. The metal screamed as it bent. The room filled with heat and smoke and the smell of burning coal. Viktor watched his grandfather's hands, thick fingers, burn scars on every knuckle, hands that knew exactly where to strike, how hard, how many times. The metal told him. Viktor's grandfather didn't measure, didn't calculate. He listened to the sound the hammer made hitting steel, watched the color change, felt the resistance through the handle. This is how Viktor learned, not from books, from watching, from doing, from understanding that metal has memory. It remembers every strike, every bend, every time it's heated and cooled. You don't force metal, you persuade it. That lesson would save his life 35 years later. In 1910, Viktor's father died. A lathe accident at the Tula Imperial Arms Factory. A spinning chuck caught his sleeve, pulled him into the machine, killed him before anyone could hit the emergency stop. Viktor was 11 years old. His mother had 3 younger children to feed. No pension, no savings, no husband. The factory foreman came to their house 3 days after the funeral. He looked at Viktor, a skinny boy with his father's dark eyes. "Can you work?" "Yes, sir." "You start tomorrow, checking rifle springs. 1 kopeck per 100 springs inspected. You keep what you earn." Viktor started work the next morning. 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. Standing at a bench with a wooden tray of springs and a go/no-go gauge his father had made. Pick up spring. Compress it. If it compressed too easily, reject pile. If it didn't compress enough, reject pile. If it felt right, accept pile. 100 springs earned 1 kopeck. Victor inspected 5,000 springs a day. His hands cramped, his back ached, his eyes blurred from staring at coiled wire, but his family ate. By the time Victor was 17, he was a certified gunsmith. Not because he'd attended school, because he'd spent 6 years doing nothing but working metal, learning by repetition, by failure, by watching older men who knew their craft. By 1941, Victor had worked at arms factories for 31 years. He'd made rifles for the Tsar, for the Revolution, for the Red Army. He'd survived the Civil War, the famine, the purges. He'd learned to work fast, to work quietly, to deliver what was ordered without asking questions. He'd learned that surviving meant being useful. And now, in July 1941, he needed to be more useful than he'd ever been. June 22nd, 1941, 4 a.m., Operation Barbarossa. 3 million German soldiers crossed the Soviet border, supported by 3,600 tanks, 2,700 aircraft, 7,000 artillery pieces, the largest invasion in human history. The Red Army had prepared, sort of. Along the border from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea, Soviet forces had positioned nearly 15,000 anti-tank guns. Different calibers, different designs, but all capable of destroying German armor. According to pre-war calculations, this was enough, more than enough. The calculations were wrong. The calculations assumed the guns would have time to deploy, time to dig in, time to establish fields of fire. The calculations assumed the enemy would attack slowly, methodically, like the last war. The calculations didn't account for blitzkrieg. German tanks didn't advance in lines. They punched through weak points, drove deep, surrounded entire armies before they could react. Soviet anti-tank guns weighed hundreds of kilograms, required horses or tractors to move, required crews of 5 to 7 men, required prepared positions, none of which existed when German tanks appeared from the tree line at 40 kilometers per hour. A Panzer III would emerge from the forest. The gun crew would scramble, try to unhitch the gun from the horse, try to swing it around, try to load a shell. 60 seconds later, it was over. The crew was dead. The gun was abandoned. The horses were running. The survivors retreated east, leaving their weapons in roadside ditches. By the end of August, most of the 15,000 anti-tank guns had become German trophies, or scrap metal, or mass graves for their crews somewhere between Brest and Smolensk. The infantry was alone. No artillery support, no anti-tank guns, no weapons capable of stopping armor, just grenades and bottles filled with gasoline and cloth wicks, Molotov cocktails. To use them, you had to let the tank get within throwing distance, 15 meters, sometimes 10, close enough to see the rivets in the armor, close enough to smell the exhaust, close enough to feel the ground shake from the treads. You stood there, a 30-ton steel machine approaching at 15 kilometers per hour, engine roaring, tracks clanking, main gun traversing, looking for you. Your throat went dry. Not from the exhaust, from fear. Your hands shook. The bottle felt slippery. The rag in the neck smelled like kerosene and your own sweat. You lit the rag. You threw. Most missed. The tank was moving. You were terrified. Your hand shook. The bottle sailed wide, exploded harmlessly 10 meters away. The tank kept coming. Many soldiers didn't throw at all. They just ran. Their legs carried them away before their brain could override the survival instinct. Running from a force of nature, like a flood, like a forest fire. The rational part of their consciousness understood that running was pointless. The tracks were faster. The machine gun would find them, but they ran anyway. This is how tank panic was born. A soldier who watched a Panzer IV crush the log roof of a dugout and grind the men inside into the mud stopped seeing tanks as targets. He saw them as supernatural, unstoppable, death on treads. You couldn't fight death. You could only run from it, even though running guaranteed you'd die anyway. The bitter irony was this. The Soviet Union had already solved the problem. In 1936, when tank armor was still relatively thin, a program began to develop anti-tank rifles, weapons infantry could carry, weapons that could penetrate armor from distances greater than grenade range. Over 3 years, Soviet designers created and tested 18 different models. One of them worked. The Rukavishnikov rifle, named after its designer. Adopted for service in 1939, it fired up to 15 rounds per minute, could be carried and operated by a 2-man crew, penetrated 20 millimeters of armor at 500 meters. For the Panzer II and early Panzer III models, this was a death sentence. Their side armor was 15 to 30 millimeters. The Rukavishnikov rifle could punch through it like paper. And then the program was cancelled. Military theorists looked at tank development trends. They extrapolated. They calculated. By the mid-1940s, they predicted tank armor would reach 60 to 80 millimeters. Anti-tank rifles would be useless against such thickness. Why waste resources manufacturing weapons that would become obsolete in 5 years? The logic was flawless. Production stopped. The designs went into archive files. The prototypes went to military museums. The designers were reassigned to other projects. Someone made this decision. His name was General Konstantin Petrov. Early July 1941, Moscow, the Kremlin. General Konstantin Petrov sits across from Stalin. He's 58 years old, Deputy People's Commissar for Armaments, a party member since 1918, a survivor of purges that consumed men smarter and more loyal than him. In 1936, it was Petrov who recommended cancelling the Rukavishnikov program. His report, dated March 14, 1936, concluded, "Anti-tank rifles will be obsolete by 1945 due to increased armor thickness. Resources better allocated to towed anti-tank artillery and tank production." Stalin approved the recommendation. The program ended. Now, 5 years later, Stalin opens a file, pulls out that exact report, places it on the desk between them. Stalin reads aloud, every word, the entire conclusion, then looks at Petrov. "You made this decision, Comrade General."
"Yes, Comrade Stalin."
"How many infantry have died because you were wrong?" Petrov's throat is dry. He knows the answer. Thousands, maybe tens of thousands. The calculations seemed sound at the time, Comrade Stalin." "Seemed. The calculations seemed sound." Stalin's voice is flat, emotionless, which is worse than anger. "German tanks do indeed have thick frontal armor, 60 to 80 millimeters, just as you predicted, but their side armor remains 30 millimeters. The Rukavishnikov rifle would penetrate it easily. But the Rukavishnikov rifle no longer exists because of your recommendation." Petrov says nothing. There is nothing to say. Stalin closes the file. "You will fix this problem, Comrade General. You will create a new anti-tank rifle. Not resurrect the old design. Too much time. Production methods have changed. Materials have changed. Design something new. Something that can be manufactured quickly in current facilities. You have 1 month. By mid-August, working prototypes. If you succeed, you keep your position. If you fail..." Stalin doesn't finish the sentence. He doesn't need to. "You are dismissed." Petrov stands, walks to the door. His legs feel unsteady. "Comrade General." Petrov turns. Stalin looks at him with eyes that have sent millions to gulags. "The soldiers dying under tank treads today are dying because of your decision 5 years ago. Remember that. Let it motivate you." This is how Viktor Morozov receives his impossible order. Not from abstract necessity. From a man desperate to undo his own catastrophic mistake before Stalin undoes him. Petrov issues directives to multiple design bureaus: Kovrov, Tula, Moscow. Each bureau receives the same impossible deadline: 1 month, working prototypes, no excuses. The order reaches Viktor on July 16, 1941, 22 days until August 7th. Viktor reads the order 3 times. Design an anti-tank rifle, 1 month. No existing designs to reference, start from 0. He looks around his workshop. 11 men, 8 lathes, 2 milling machines, one drill press. No one speaks. Then old Orloff, the senior foreman, 60 years old, missing 2 fingers on his left hand from a machinery accident in 1923, says, "Well, we should probably get started." Victor had one advantage the Moscow engineers didn't have. He didn't think in formulas. He thought in metal.
When an engineer designed a part, he drew it first,
Then calculated stresses. Then sent the drawing to a machinist who made it. Then discovered the part didn't quite work as drawn. Then redesigned it. Victor worked backwards. He imagined the part in his head, saw how it would move, how it would fit, how it would wear. Then he made it. When it worked, someone drew a blueprint for mass production. This method was faster, not better, just faster. And faster was all that mattered.
Victor divided his bureau into 2 groups.
Group A, Victor and 3 old machinists. They would design a single-shot rifle. 1 bullet, manual reload, bolt action, simple as a door lock. Group B, young engineer Lebedev and 4 assistants. They would design a magazine-fed rifle, multiple rounds, semi-automatic loading, complex but effective. 2 approaches, 2 chances to succeed. If one path hit a dead end, the other might work. This wasn't collaboration, this was insurance.
The cartridge was already selected,
the 14.5 by 114mm round, originally designed for heavy machine guns mounted on vehicles, massive, powerful, capable of penetrating 40mm of steel at close range, but designed to be fired from a weapon that weighed 50 kilograms and was bolted to a truck. Victor was going to build a rifle a man could carry, a rifle that weighed maybe 18 kilograms, maybe 20, and when that rifle fired a 14.5mm cartridge, the recoil would be catastrophic, like getting hit in the shoulder with a sledgehammer every single shot. Victor knew this. There was no solution, only mitigation. He would add a muzzle brake to redirect some of the gas, a padded stock to absorb some impact, a spring in the trigger assembly to dampen some shock. But the shooter would still suffer. The rifle would injure its own user almost as reliably as it injured the enemy. Victor accepted this.
He had no choice.
A weapon that hurt its user but killed the enemy was better than no weapon at all, better than watching your friends die under tank treads while you stood helpless with a rifle that couldn't penetrate armor thicker than a cooking pot. Victor started sketching. Not detailed drawings, just rough concepts. A long barrel, a heavy receiver, a bolt mechanism, a trigger assembly. He showed the sketches to Orlov. The old man studied them, traced the lines with his damaged hand.
"This will kick like an angry mule."
"I know. The shooter's shoulder will be black and blue after 5 shots." "I know." "You're going to build it anyway?" "Yes." "Then let's build it." Victor had one more advantage, a personal motivation that kept him working when exhaustion said stop. His son, Alexei Morozov, 17 years old, mobilized in late June, assigned to the 16th Army, currently deployed northwest of Moscow in the Volokholamsk direction, the most dangerous sector on the entire front. Victor received letters. Not often, mail service was sporadic, but when letters came, he read them until the paper wore soft. Alexei's last letter dated July 4th. "Father, we saw German tanks yesterday, 4 of them. We had no anti-tank guns, no anti-tank rifles, nothing. The platoon lieutenant told us to hold position, to fight them with grenades. I was more afraid than I have ever been in my life. The tanks didn't attack. They turned and went a different direction, toward a different unit. I heard later that unit was destroyed, crushed, 60 men dead in 15 minutes. Father, if you can do anything to help us fight these machines, please hurry. Your son, Alexei." Victor folded the letter, put it in his jacket pocket, kept it there. Every time he wanted to sleep, every time his hands hurt too much to continue, every time the design seemed impossible, he touched the letter. Alexei was out there, waiting, praying someone would send him a weapon that could stop the steel. Victor would send that weapon, even if it took every hour of the next 22 days, even if he never slept again. He would finish this, because if he failed, Alexei would face the next panzer attack with nothing but a bottle of gasoline and 15 meters of terror. and Victor would never forgive himself. The calendar on the wall said July 16th, 22 days until August 7th. Victor picked up a piece of chalk, drew a line on the steel workbench. This is the receiver. We start here. The machinists gathered around. The clock started. 22 days to do the impossible. July 17th, 1941. Day 1. Victor stands at his workbench at 4:30 in the morning. The factory is dark, cold. The only light comes from a single bulb hanging over the lathe. He didn't sleep. He tried. Lay in bed for 2 hours staring at the ceiling, then gave up. Came back to the workshop. His hands move across the steel receiver blank, feeling for imperfections, rough spots, inclusions in the metal that could cause failures. This piece of steel will become the heart of the rifle, the receiver, the part that contains the explosion when the cartridge fires. If the receiver fails, the rifle explodes, the shooter dies, or worse, survives without a face. Victor runs his fingers along the steel one more time. Good metal, dense, no cracks, no soft spots. He mounts it in the lathe, adjusts the cutting tool, checks the calibration. Then he starts the machine. The lathe spins, the cutting tool bites into steel, ribbons of metal curl away, the smell of cutting oil fills the air. Victor watches. His eyes never leave the workpiece. 40 years of experience condensed into absolute focus. The machine knows nothing. The metal knows nothing. Only Victor knows what this needs to become. Behind him, footsteps. Orlov arrives. Then 2 more machinists. Then Lebedev and his engineering team. No one speaks. They just start working. The clock says 5:17 a.m. 21 days and 19 hours remaining. By noon, Victor has the basic receiver shape roughed out. Lebedev approaches. He's 28 years old. Moscow Polytechnic. 4 years of engineering study. Smart, confident, young. He carries a rolled set of drawings. I have the initial magazine design concepts. Victor doesn't look up from his work. Show me. Lebedev unrolls the drawings on the workbench. Detailed schematics, cross-sections, assembly views. The magazine holds 5 rounds, spring-loaded, feeds cartridges into the action automatically. Professional, sophisticated, beautiful, actually. Victor studies the drawings for 3 minutes. Then he asks the only question that matters. How many parts? 47 primary components, not counting fasteners and pins. How many require precision milling? Lebedev hesitates. He knows where this is going. 23. How long to manufacture one complete rifle, including all 47 parts plus assembly? With our current equipment, approximately 18 hours of machine time. Victor looks at the calendar, then back at Lebedev. We have 3 weeks. Let's say we work 20 hours per day. That's 420 hours total. At 18 hours per rifle, we can make 23 rifles, maybe 25 if nothing goes wrong. Well, Stalin wants hundreds, thousands. He wants them manufactured in factories that made textiles last month, factories that don't have precision milling equipment, factories that have universal lathes and drill presses and nothing else. Lebedev's jaw tightens. So what do you suggest? A single-shot design like it's 1870? Yes. That's absurd. Magazine-fed is the future. Every modern military rifle is made in peacetime factories with trained machinists and quality control and time. Victor's voice is calm, flat. We have none of those things. We have 3 weeks and desperate men and lathes that were making cloth patterns 20 days ago. Your design is technically superior. I'm not arguing that. But superior doesn't matter if we can only make 25 of them. I need to make 20,000. Lebedev stares at him. You're choosing quantity over quality. I'm choosing rifles that exist over rifles that don't. The young engineer rolls up his drawings. His face is red. This is a mistake. You're building obsolete weapons. Then I'm building obsolete weapons. Get to work. Lebedev walks away. The other machinists keep their heads down. They heard everything. They say nothing. Orlov catches Victor's eye, nods slightly. The old man understands. In war, Good enough today beats perfect never. July 24th, day 7. Victor hasn't been home in 3 days. His wife brought food yesterday, found him asleep with his head on the workbench,
a half-finished muzzle brake in his hand.
She didn't wake him, just left the food and a note. Alexei sent another letter. He's well. He asks about you. Come home when you can. Victor found the note when he woke up, read it, put it in his pocket with Alexei's letter. Then went back to work. The rifle is taking shape. The receiver is finished, bored and threaded, heat treated to handle the pressure. The barrel is finished, 48 inches long, rifled with a 1 in 15 twist. Capable of stabilizing the heavy 14.5mm bullet, the bolt assembly is finished. Massive. Weighs almost a kilogram by itself. Designed to handle the enormous chamber pressure. But Victor has a problem. The recoil. He's done the calculations, estimated the forces. The numbers are terrifying. When this rifle fires, the recoil energy will be approximately 12,000 joules. For comparison, a standard infantry rifle produces about 1,500 joules, 8 times more force, concentrated into a steel buttplate pressed against a human shoulder. Victor has added a muzzle brake. It redirects 60% of the propellant gas sideways. This reduces felt recoil significantly. He's added a thick rubber pad on the buttstock. This spreads the impact over a larger area. He's added a spring-loaded buffer in the trigger assembly. This slows the rearward movement slightly. But even with all these modifications, firing this rifle will hurt. Badly. Victor knows this.
He accepts it. The alternative is worse. The alternative is infantry facing tanks with bottles and prayers. He picks up the assembled rifle, hefts it, feels the weight, 17.2 kilograms, just under his target of 18. Long, awkward, heavy. Soldiers will call it names, curse it, hate carrying it through mud and snow. But they'll use it, because it gives them something they don't have now, a chance. July 28th, day 11. The factory director, Sokolov, enters the workshop. He's 53 years old, grey hair, 3-piece suit despite the July heat, a party member since 1919, a survivor. Morozov, a word. Victor wipes his hands on a rag, follows Sokolov to the small office overlooking the factory floor. Sokolov closes the door, sits behind his desk. I received a call from Moscow. They want a progress report. Tell them we're on schedule. Are you? Yes. Sokolov studies him, tired eyes, lines around the mouth. The look of a man who's seen too many deadlines missed and too many people disappear because of it. Lebedev filed a complaint, says you rejected his magazine design without proper technical review, says you're building an obsolete weapon that will get soldiers killed. Victor says nothing. He's not wrong about the technical aspects. Magazine-fed is superior in combat effectiveness. Magazine-fed is superior if you can build enough of them and train men to use them and maintain them and supply parts when they break. We can't do any of those things in 3 weeks. I know. Sokolov opens a drawer, pulls out a bottle of vodka and 2 glasses. Pause. I'm not questioning your decision. I'm telling you that if this fails, Lebedev's complaint will be the evidence they use to shoot both of us. He slides 1 glass across the desk. But if it works, his complaint disappears. Success erases all objections. Victor picks up the glass, drinks. The vodka burns. It will work. I hope you're right. Sokolov drinks his own glass. Because I'm betting my life on you. I told Moscow you're the only one who can do this. The Moscow engineers with their degrees and their theories can't think fast enough. But you think with your hands. You make things work. He pours another round. I was a machinist too, 20 years ago, before they made me management. I remember what it's like to know something without being able to explain it, to feel when metal is right, to hear when a cut is clean. I'm trusting that knowledge now. Don't make me regret it. Victor finishes the 2nd glass. I won't. August 2nd, day 16. The first complete prototype is ready. Victor carries it to the testing ground behind the factory. A rifle range with earthen berms and target frames at various distances. The test crew waits. A sergeant from the local garrison, Ruslan Belov, 32 years old, veteran of the Finnish War, missing his left earlobe from frostbite. Belov looks at the rifle. That's the biggest damn rifle I've ever seen. 14.5 millimeter. Sweet Jesus, that's going to kick. Yes. How bad? Bad. Belov picks it up, shoulders it, his eyes widen. This weighs, what, 20 kilos? 17. Feels like 20. He works the bolt. The action is smooth, heavy, built like a bank vault. What am I shooting at? That. Victor points to a steel plate at the 100-meter mark, 30 millimeters thick, the same thickness as Panzer III side armor. Belov looks at the plate, then at the rifle, then at Victor. You think this will punch through 30 millimeters? We're about to find out. Belov assumes a prone position, settles the rifle, adjusts his grip. Fire when ready. Belov takes a breath, lets it out halfway, squeezes the trigger. The rifle fires. The sound is enormous. Not a crack, a concussion, a shockwave that hits you in the chest, even at 20 meters away. And something goes wrong. The receiver ruptures. Not an explosion, a failure. A crack opens along the right side of the receiver. Gas vents out under pressure. The bolt blows backward, hits the receiver bridge. Belov screams. The rifle has split open. Hot gas has burned his face. The bolt, moving backward with enormous force, has broken his collarbone, where the stock slammed into his shoulder. He's rolling on the ground, blood on his face, arm hanging wrong. Victor runs forward. Others follow. Someone yells for a medic. They pull Belov to safety. The medic examines him. Burned skin on his right cheek, collarbone broken, severe bruising, but alive. The rifle lies on the ground, smoking, split open like a broken toy. Lebedev appears. He's been watching from a distance. I told you. The design is flawed. You rushed it. You didn't do the calculations. You just guessed and hoped. Victor ignores him. He's examining the failed receiver. The crack runs along a weld line. The steel was good. The dimensions were right. But the weld was weak, cold welded, insufficient penetration. His fault. He'd been so focused on speed that he'd rushed the welding, hadn't checked it properly, hadn't verified the penetration. Belov is being carried to the factory infirmary, still conscious, cursing steadily. Victor watches him go. Then he picks up the broken rifle, carries it back to the workshop. Orlov follows. What now? We fix it. You can't fix a fundamental design flaw. It's not a design flaw, it's a manufacturing flaw. The weld failed. The weld can be improved. You have 6 days left. Then I better work fast. That night, Victor doesn't leave the workshop. He examines the failed receiver under magnification, studies the crack pattern, measures the material thickness. The design is sound. The steel can handle the pressure, but the weld needs to be perfect. He pulls out the welding equipment, adjusts the settings, increases the current, slows the travel speed. Then he welds a test piece, lets it cool, cuts it in half, examines the cross-section. Good penetration, full fusion, no porosity. He welds another test piece, same results. By 3 a.m., he's confident. He begins building the second receiver. This time the welds are perfect, slow, careful. Each pass inspected before the next begins. By dawn, the new receiver is complete, heat-treated, stress-relieved, inspected. Victor assembles the second prototype, uses the same barrel, same bolt, same trigger assembly. Everything except the receiver is identical to the first rifle. By noon, it's ready. August 3rd, day 17. Back to the testing range. This time, the test shooter is Orlov. The old foreman volunteered. I've got nothing to lose. I'm 60 years old. If this thing kills me, at least I die quick. Victor doesn't argue. Orlov shoulders the rifle, settles into position, aims at the steel plate. Here we go. He fires. Crack. The sound is the same, enormous, violent. But this time, the rifle holds together. Orlov doesn't scream, but he's lying flat on his back, eyes wide. The recoil has physically thrown him backward.
Holy Mother of God! Victor runs forward. Are you hit? Is anything broken? Orlov sits up slowly, rolls his shoulder, winces. Nothing broken. But that... He pauses, searching for words. Like a battering ram hit my shoulder. Concentrated. Brutal. I've been kicked by horses. This is worse. He stands. His right shoulder already shows bruising through his shirt, but he's standing. Victor looks downrange. The steel plate has a hole in it. Not a dent, not a crater, a clean hole. 30 millimeters of steel punched through like paper. Entry hole, 15 millimeters. Exit hole, 23 millimeters. The bullet tumbled after penetration, tearing a larger hole on the backside. Exactly as designed. Victor walks to the plate, runs his finger around the hole. The edges are sharp, torn. The steel deformed under the impact. This would kill a tank crew. Not destroy the tank, but kill the men inside, or disable the engine, or rupture a fuel line, or shatter the transmission. A mobility kill at minimum. He walks back to where Orlov is rubbing his shoulder. Can you fire again? Now? Yes. Orlov looks at the rifle like it's a snake. How many times do I need to shoot this devil? 5 times. I need to know if the receiver holds up under repeated firing. Orlov mutters something under his breath, picks up the rifle. Over the next 30 minutes, he fires 5 more rounds. Each time, he grunts, curses, rolls his shoulder. The third shot, he describes it differently. Like being struck by lightning. All the force, all at once, right here. He touches his shoulder joint. By the 6th shot, Orlov's shoulder is purple-black. He can barely lift his arm. But the rifle functions, the receiver holds, the bolt cycles, and each time the steel plate gains another hole. By the 6th shot, Orlov's shoulder is purple-black. He can barely lift his arm, but the rifle works. Victor makes notes in his logbook. Rifle functions correctly, recoil severe but manageable with training, penetration confirmed at 100 meters, receiver holds under repeated firing. He looks at Orlov. We're done. Go to the infirmary. Get your shoulder looked at. The old man nods, hands the rifle to Victor. This weapon is going to make a lot of men very unhappy. I know. But it works. Yes. Then build 1,000 of them. August 7th, day 22. The acceptance commission arrives from Moscow. 3 army officers, 2 civilian engineers, 1 party political officer. They examine both prototypes. Victor's single-shot design, Lebedev's magazine-fed design. Both rifles fire, both penetrate armor, both function, but only one can be mass-produced quickly. The commission deliberates for 2 hours. Then the senior officer, a colonel from General Zhukov's staff, makes the announcement. Both designs are accepted for service. Both will be designated for production. However, immediate priority goes to the Morozov single-shot rifle. Designation PTRD. Production begins immediately. Lebedev's face goes white. But sir, the magazine design is superior in peacetime, yes, but we are not in peacetime. We need 10,000 rifles in 60 days. Morozov's design can be manufactured in any factory with basic lathes. Yours requires specialized equipment we don't have. Both designs will eventually be produced, but Morozov's design goes first. The colonel turns to Victor. How fast can you begin production? 2 weeks to set up the first production line, then 50 rifles per day initially, ramping to 200 per day by October. Make it happen. September 22nd, 1941. 45 days after Victor received the impossible order, the first production batch of PTRD rifles rolls off the assembly line at Kovrov. 50 rifles, serial numbers 0001 through 0050. Each one inspected personally by Victor. Each one test-fired. Each one packed in cosmoline and crated for shipment. They're not beautiful. They're utilitarian, simple, brutal, but they work. And more importantly, they can be built fast. Textile factories in Ivanovo are already converting their looms. Automotive plants in Gorky are setting up production lines. Even furniture factories are being retooled. Because the PTRD is simple enough that anyone with basic machining skills can make the parts. That was Victor's genius. Not creating the best anti-tank rifle. Creating the anti-tank rifle that could actually be built in the quantities needed. Simple beats perfect when time is the constraint. October 26, 1941. A telegram arrives at Kovrov factory from General Georgy Zhukov, Western Front Commander, to Kovrov Arms Plant Production Division. First 300 PTRD rifles to be shipped immediately to 16th Army, Volokholamsk direction. Most critical sector, priority transportation. Confirm receipt and shipment schedule. Victor reads the telegram 3 times. 16th Army. Alexei's unit. His hands shake, just slightly, just enough that the paper trembles. 300 rifles, heading to the same sector where his son is fighting. Alexei will be among the first soldiers to use the weapon Victor designed. If it fails, Alexei dies. If it works, maybe Alexei survives. Victor walks to the production floor, watches workers assembling rifles. Each one identical, each one destined for the front. One of these rifles might save his son's life, or might explode in his son's hands because Victor missed some flaw, some weakness, some design error. He won't know until the first combat reports come back. All he can do is trust the work, trust the testing, trust that 22 days of hell produced something that will keep Soviet soldiers alive. He returns to his office, picks up a pen, writes a brief note on official factory letterhead. Not to Zhukov, to Alexei. Son, 300 rifles shipping to your sector tomorrow. They work. I tested them myself. Recoil is severe but survivable. Aim for side armor at 150 meters or less. Fire and move immediately. The muzzle flash will give away your position. I built this for you, for all of you. Stay alive, Father. He seals the note, gives it to the transport officer, with instructions to deliver it to 16th Army headquarters, along with the rifles. Then he sits at his desk, touches the letter in his pocket. Alexei's words from July. Father, if you can do anything to help us fight these machines, please hurry. Victor has done everything he can. Now the rifles must speak for themselves. And somewhere northwest of Moscow, his son will discover if his father's 22 days of work were enough. November 16th, 1941, 5:47 a.m. Northwest of Moscow, Volokholamsk Highway. Sergeant Grigory Volkov lies in a foxhole that smells of frozen earth and old sweat. He's 24 years old, former hunter from Siberia, hands that can skin a deer in 12 minutes, eyes that can spot a fox at 600 meters. Next to him lies a rifle he's never seen before, the PTRD. It arrived 3 days ago, 300 of them, distributed across the 316th Rifle Division, Panfilov's division, the division holding the most critical sector between the Germans and Moscow. Volkov and 19-year-old Pyotr Antonov spent yesterday learning how to use it. The instructor, a factory technician from Kovrov, was blunt. This rifle weighs 17 kilograms. You will hate carrying it. The recoil will bruise you badly. Fire more than 15 rounds in one day, and your shoulder will be useless for a week. The muzzle flash will reveal your position immediately after you fire. The Germans will shoot at that flash. You must move after every shot, or you will die. But at 150 meters or less, this rifle will penetrate the side armor of any German tank currently in service. It will kill the crew, or disable the engine, or rupture fuel lines. You are no longer helpless against armor. Questions? Volkov had one question. How many shots before the rifle breaks? The technician smiled slightly. We've test-fired individual rifles over 300 times. The rifle will outlast you. Now, in the pre-dawn darkness of November 16th, Volkov wishes he'd asked different questions. Like how to stop your hands from shaking when you can hear tank engines in the distance. Like how to aim when your heart is beating so hard you can see the rifle barrel moving. Like how to not run when every instinct says run. The sound grows louder. Tank engines, multiple, coming from the west. Dawn is breaking. Grey light spreading across frozen fields. Then Volkov sees them. 4 Panzer IIIs,
moving in line formation across the snow, 200 meters away and closing. They look enormous, 30 tons of steel and death, turrets swiveling, searching. Volkov's throat goes dry. Beside him, Antonov whispers, "Holy Mother of God." Volkov forces himself to breathe, to think. The instructor's words come back. Wait until 150 meters or less. Side armor is your target. Aim for the hull between the tracks and turret. That's where the crew sits. That's where the engine lives. The tanks are at 180 meters now, 170, 160. The lead tank turns slightly, exposing its side. 150 meters. Volkov shoulders the PTRD. The weight settles. Heavy, solid. Through the iron sights, he sees the Panzer III's hull. Rivets, welds, a vision port. He aims just below the turret ring, where the armor is thinnest. Breathes out. Squeezes the trigger. The rifle fires. The recoil is violence made physical, an explosion of force that drives bone into muscle. Not like being hit, like being crushed. The impact travels through his shoulder, down his spine, into his hips. He's thrown backward, nearly loses his grip. His ears ring, his vision blurs. But through watering eyes, through the aftermath of concussion, he sees. The Panzer III has stopped. Smoke pours from its engine deck. The hatch opens. German crew scrambling out, running. The tank is burning. Volkov stares. Cannot believe what he's seeing. He killed a tank. Him. One man. One rifle. Beside him, Antonov is reloading his own PTRD with shaking hands. The second Panzer III's turret swings toward them. Volkov screams, "Move!" They roll out of the foxhole, sprint 30 meters to the left, dive into a shell crater. The German 50mm cannon fires. The round hits exactly where they'd been lying. Earth and frozen mud explode skyward. Antonov fires from the new position. His shot hits the second tank's tracks. The right tread shatters. The tank slews sideways. Immobilized, but not destroyed. The turret is still operational, still searching. Volkov reloads. The bolt is massive, requires real force to work. His hands are numb from cold and adrenaline, but he manages. Shoulders the rifle again. This time, he's braced, expecting the punishment. Aims at the immobilized tank's side. Fires. The recoil hits like before, like a truck ramming his shoulder at full speed. But he doesn't fall, stays in position. The bullet punches through. He sees the impact point, sees metal tear. Inside that tank, something catastrophic happens. Maybe the fuel tank ruptures, maybe ammunition cooks off. The Panzer III explodes. Not Hollywood dramatic, just a dull thump. Hatches blow open, smoke pours out. No one escapes. The remaining two tanks reverse, rapidly. They've lost two tanks in 30 seconds and haven't identified where the fire is coming from. They retreat beyond the ridgeline. Silence. Volkov's shoulder is screaming. The pain is extraordinary, like the bone is broken, like the muscle is torn. He touches it gingerly, feels the heat, the swelling already starting. After 17 shots over the next 3 days, his shoulder will go from pain to numbness to something worse than both, a permanent ache that will never fully heal. But right now, in this moment, he doesn't care. He's alive. The tanks are dead or retreating. Antonov is vomiting into the snow. Reaction. Adrenaline crash. Fear finally permitted to express itself. Across the defensive line, other PTRD teams have engaged. Reports will later show 6 German tanks destroyed or disabled that morning. 6 tanks stopped by infantry, by men with rifles. For the first time since June, Soviet soldiers didn't run from armor. They fought it, and won. By the end of November, reports flood back to Kovrov factory. The PTRD works. Not perfectly, not elegantly, but effectively. Tank crews report severe shoulder injuries, bruising, dislocated collarbones, hearing damage from the muzzle blast. But they also report dead German tanks, immobilized tanks, tanks retreating when they encounter PTRD fire.
The psychological effect is profound. Soviet infantry is no longer helpless. They have a weapon. A terrible, brutal weapon that hurts them almost as much as it hurts the enemy. But it works. Production accelerates. By January 1942, Kovrov is producing 200 rifles per day. Ivanovo Textile Factory, 150 per day. Gorky Automotive Plant, 300 per day. Simple design means simple production. By the end of 1942, total production reaches 184,800 rifles. Every rifle regiment now has at least 27 PTRD rifles. Some have 54. Anti-tank rifle platoons become standard. 18 rifles per battalion. Soldiers specialize. PTRD gunners develop their own tactics, their own techniques. They're respected because they do what others fear. They're pitied because everyone knows the price. Every PTRD gunner has a destroyed shoulder, permanent hearing loss, psychological trauma from the violence of firing the weapon. But they keep firing, because the alternative is worse. Mid-1942, Stuttgart, Germany. The Porsche Design Bureau receives urgent directives from Wehrmacht Tank Command. Casualty reports from the Eastern Front show disturbing patterns. Panzer IIIs are being destroyed at unacceptable rates. Not by Soviet tanks, not by anti-tank guns, by infantry rifles, small caliber, man-portable, appearing in increasing numbers. Intelligence reports identify it as the PTRD, 14.5mm anti-tank rifle. Effective range 150 meters, capable of penetrating 30 to 40 millimeters of armor. Every Panzer III has exactly 30 millimeters of side armor. The mathematics are simple and terrible. Chief Engineer Heinrich Müller presents the problem to his design team. Gentlemen, we have three options. Increase side armor thickness to 60 millimeters. This makes the tank too heavy and too slow. Decrease operations on the Eastern Front. Politically unacceptable. Or develop supplementary protection that can be added to existing tanks without complete redesign. The third option wins. They call it Schürzen. Skirts. Thin steel plates, 5 millimeters thick, mounted on brackets 10 centimeters away from the main armor. The physics are elegant. The PTRD bullet hits the thin screen, penetrates easily. But the penetration destabilizes the bullet. It tumbles, hits the main armor sideways or base first. No penetration. The cost is modest, 300 to 400 Reichsmarks per tank. But when multiplied across thousands of tanks, the cost becomes millions of Reichsmarks, thousands of tons of steel, months of production time, all because of a rifle designed in 22 days by a machinist with no engineering degree. German documents, declassified in the 1990s, are explicit. Schürzen development specifically addresses Soviet 14.5mm anti-tank rifle threat. Cost-benefit analysis. Acceptable expense versus projected tank losses. Implementation. All Panzer III, Panzer IV, and Stug variants. Priority. Immediate. Viktor Morozov's impossible rifle forced the entire German armored force to redesign. December 1943. Viktor receives permission to visit the front. He's 44 years old now, grey in his hair, lines around his eyes. 2 years of 18-hour days have aged him. He carries documents identifying him as the PTRD designer. Factory representative, technical consultant. Really, he wants to see what his weapon has done. The Western Front headquarters arranges transport. A supply truck heading to forward positions near Smolensk. Viktor rides in back, watching the countryside pass, snow-covered fields, burned villages, tank hulks rusting in ditches, evidence of 2 years of war. At a forward aid station, he meets PTRD gunners being treated for injuries. Sergeant Grigory Volkov is among them, the same man who killed his first tank in November 1941. 26 years old now, looks 40, shoulder permanently deformed, right arm hangs at a slight angle, hearing aids in both ears. Viktor introduces himself. Volkov stares. "You're Morozov, the designer?"
Yes. Volkov's face does something complicated. Gratitude, anger, exhaustion. Your rifle saved my life 4 times, probably more that I don't know about. Every time German tanks appeared, I had something to fight them with.
That's because of you. He pauses.
Your rifle also broke my collarbone, destroyed my hearing. My shoulder will never work properly again. I have nightmares about the sound it makes, about the men burning inside tanks I set on fire. I'm 26 years old. I feel 70. My body is broken. My mind is broken. Would I use the rifle again if ordered? Yes. Does that mean I forgive you for creating it? No. Victor has no response.
What can he say? The rifle does exactly what it was designed to do. Kill tanks. Hurt its users. Both outcomes were inevitable. Both were necessary.
Volkov sees Victor's expression. I'm not looking for an apology. You built what you were ordered to build. You did it well. Men are alive because of your work. Men are also broken because of your work. That's the nature of weapons. I just wanted you to know both parts, the glory and the suffering.
Because you won't read about the suffering in the reports.
Victor nods slowly. Thank you for telling me. That night, Victor writes in his journal, a journal he's kept since July 1941. Today I met men who used my rifle. They're grateful and damaged in equal measure. I created a tool that saved tens of thousands of lives by ending other lives and destroying the bodies of the men who wielded it. This is the mathematics of war. Ugly, necessary, unforgivable. I'm proud of what I built.
I'm ashamed of what it costs.
Both things are true. January 1945. Kovrov. Victor's door opens without knocking. Alexei stands there. Victor hasn't seen his son in 3 years. Letters, yes. Photographs, occasionally. But not in person. Alexei looks older than 21. Much older. Grey at the temples. Scars on his face from muzzle flash burns. Right arm hanging at a slight angle. The same deformity Volkov had. They stare at each other. You're home, Victor says finally.
Medical discharge. Shoulder destroyed. Death in right ear. Unfit for further service.
Alexei walks into the room, moves like an old man, every step careful, calculated. Victor sees it, the permanent damage, the body broken. I'm sorry. Don't. Alexei's voice is flat, empty. Don't apologize. You did what you were ordered. I did what I was ordered. We both followed the plan. He sits heavily at the kitchen table. Victor's wife appears in the doorway, sees them, quietly leaves.
I used your rifle 17 times, Alexei continues. Killed German tanks. Saved my platoon multiple times. Survived battles that killed everyone around me.
Your weapon worked perfectly, exactly as designed. Victor waits, dreading what comes next. But every time I pull this shoulder back, Alexei demonstrates, winces. I feel that recoil again. Every time I can't hear someone speaking on my right side, I remember the muzzle blast.
Every time I close my eyes, I see men burning inside tanks I set on fire.
You saved my life, Father, and you destroyed it. Both things. Same rifle. Victor sits across from him, wants to speak, wants to explain, wants to make it better. But there are no words. Nothing he can say will heal what the rifle broke. Alexei stands to leave. His movements are stiff, painful. I'm not angry, I'm just empty. I can't look at you without seeing that weapon, without feeling that pain. I don't blame you, but I can't forgive you either. Maybe someday, but not now. He walks to the door, pauses with his hand on the knob. Thank you for keeping me alive. I wish you hadn't. The door closes. Victor sits alone at the table. His wife comes back, puts her hand on his shoulder, says nothing. There's nothing to say. Victor understands finally that saving someone's life and destroying it can be the exact same action. They never speak again, not at family gatherings,
not at holidays, not through letters.
Alexei moves to Leningrad, changes his last name, severs all connection. Victor receives updates through his wife. Alexei married. Alexei had children. Alexei found work as a machinist, ironically. using his one good arm. But they never speak. The rifle stands between them like a wall of steel and violence and impossible choices. Victor could have refused the assignment, could have failed intentionally, could have built something that didn't work. Then Alexei would have died under tank treads in 1941. Or Victor builds the rifle, saves Alexei's life, destroys his body, loses his son anyway. There was no third option. There never is in war. April 1945. Germany surrenders. The war in Europe ends. Victor continues working. Kovrov transitions from wartime to peacetime production. PTRD rifles are still being made, though at lower rates. Stockpiled, prepared for conflicts that might come. He receives awards, Medal for Labor Valor, Order of the Red Banner. His name appears in factory newsletters. A photograph of him with the PTRD prototype is published in a military history journal. He deflects all praise. I built what was needed. Others fought with it. They're the heroes. He never mentions Alexei, never mentions the cost. But he thinks about it every day. March 12, 1968. Viktor Morozov dies at his home in Kovrov. He's 69 years old. Heart failure. Quick, relatively painless. His wife arranges a modest funeral. Factory colleagues attend, a few old machinists, some officials from the local party office. Alexei does not attend. Victor's wife sent a telegram 3 days before. Your father is dying. He asks for you. Alexei's reply was brief. I cannot come. At the cemetery, the service is short. A party official reads from prepared remarks, mentions Victor's contributions to the war effort, the PTRD rifle, the lives saved, does not mention the lives broken, does not mention the son who will not come. Victor is buried in Kovrov City Cemetery. A simple headstone, name, dates, one line, designer, PTRD, anti-tank rifle, 1941. No mention of medals, no mention of production numbers, no mention of impact, just the weapon and the year. At the cemetery, standing 50 meters from the funeral, a man watches. Alexei Morozov, 44 years old, right shoulder permanently deformed, walking with a slight limp now, the body breaking down faster than it should. He didn't attend the funeral, didn't speak to the mourners, didn't approach the grave. But he came, stood at distance, watched his father buried. Someone approaches. Old Orlov, 72 now, walks with a cane, left the funeral early when he spotted Alexei in the distance. He asked about you, every day until the end. Alexei says nothing, keeps his eyes on the grave. He knew what the rifle cost you. It cost him too. Not the same. No, not the same. But he carried it, in his way. Orlov reaches into his coat, pulls out a small notebook, worn leather cover, pages yellowed with age. He wanted you to have this, when you were ready. His journal from 1941. Alexei takes it. The leather is soft, warm from Orlov's pocket. He opens to a random page. July 24th, 1941. Victor's handwriting, still precise despite exhaustion. If this rifle saves Alexei but breaks him, have I succeeded or failed? I don't know the answer. I will never know the answer. But I must finish it anyway, because the alternative is watching him die, and I cannot live with that alternative. So I choose this. I choose his broken body over his death. I choose his hatred over his grave. This is the only choice a father can make. I pray he understands someday. I pray he forgives. But if he cannot, I still choose this. Alexei closes the book. His hands are shaking. He looks at the grave. Fresh earth. Flowers wilting in the March cold. Orlov stands beside him, silent, waiting. I should have come, Alexei says finally, voice barely above a whisper. You came now, that counts. Does it? I think so. He would have thought so. Alexei puts the journal in his coat, beside his heart. He won't read the rest of it today, maybe not for years, maybe not until he's dying himself, but he'll keep it, because somewhere in those pages is the father he lost when the rifle came between them. And maybe, eventually, he'll understand the impossible choice Victor made. Save your son's life. Lose your son's love. No father should have to choose, but war doesn't care about should. Goodbye, father, Alexei whispers to the grave, then walks away. Orlov watches him go, then turns to the grave. He came, Victor. Not the way you wanted, but he came. That's something. The old man turns, walks slowly back to his car, leaving Viktor Morozov alone in the earth. The man who built the impossible rifle in 22 impossible days. The man who saved his son and lost him in the same act. The man who understood, too late, that some victories feel exactly like defeat. The PTRD continues. After Germany surrenders, the rifles don't disappear. They're packed in cosmoline, stored in warehouses, shipped to allies. In Korea, 1950, Chinese volunteers used them against American M4 Sherman tanks. Side armor, 38 millimeters. The PTRD can penetrate at close range. In the Middle East, 1967 and 1973, various nations deploy them in border conflicts, against lighter armored vehicles, against fortified positions. In Afghanistan, 1980s, Soviet forces encounter their own rifles in the hands of Mujahideen fighters. Weapons shipped as aid decades earlier, now turned against their creators. In Chechnya, 1990s, the rifles appear in urban combat, still functional, still deadly against lighter armored vehicles. In 2014, eastern Ukraine, a separatist fighter pulls a PTRD from a storage depot. The rifle is 73 years old. Cosmoline is cleaned off. The action is checked. Surprisingly smooth. The steel has survived decades because Victor designed it to be simple, durable, fixable. A 14.5mm cartridge is loaded, also old stock, but ammunition is simpler than rifles, powder and primer and bullet. If stored correctly, it lasts forever. The rifle fires. The bullet penetrates a modern armored car at 120 meters. 73 years after manufacture, Victor's design still works, still kills, still serves the purpose for which it was created. In 1979, Soviet archives declassified documents related to wartime weapons development. Historians discover the full story. 22 days from order to prototype. Single-shot design chosen over magazine-fed for production speed. 281,111 rifles manufactured. The rifle that forced Germany to redesign its entire armored force. Articles appear in military history journals. Victor's name enters the record. The craftsman who thought in metal instead of mathematics. The 14.5 by 114mm cartridge Victor's rifle used becomes standard. Even in 2024, the cartridge is still in service. KPV, heavy machine guns. ZPU, anti-aircraft systems. Modern anti-material rifles. 83 years after its development, Victor's ammunition choice remains relevant. In 2019, a military museum in Tula opens a special exhibition. The PTRD, Simplicity Under Pressure. Displayed. An original 1941 prototype. Victor's original sketches. Letters from frontline soldiers. Photographs of factory production. And a German Schürzen panel. With a placard. German supplementary armor, developed specifically to counter the Soviet PTRD rifle. Evidence that battlefield innovation forces industrial adaptation. One machinist's 22 days of work required Germany to modify thousands of tanks. A photograph of Victor, 1941, standing with the first prototype. His face is tired, his hands are scarred, his eyes are focused on something beyond the camera. Maybe he's thinking about Alexei. Maybe he's thinking about the soldiers who will use this rifle. Maybe he's thinking about nothing at all, just the next problem, the next piece of metal, the next cut. The photograph doesn't say, but the rifle beside him says everything. Simple, brutal, effective. A weapon built when impossible was the only option. The final word belongs to an American. In 1951, US Army ordnance captures several PTRD rifles in Korea. They're shipped to Aberdeen Proving Ground for analysis. The evaluation report, now declassified. The Soviet PTRD represents a philosophy antithetical to American weapons development. We prioritize technological sophistication. The Soviets prioritized manufacturing simplicity. Our anti-tank weapons require specialized facilities and trained technicians. The PTRD can be made in any machine shop with basic lathes. In terms of pure battlefield effectiveness, American weapons are superior. But the PTRD was available in quantities we cannot match. Tens of thousands produced in months, distributed to every infantry unit. The lesson: in wartime, adequate weapons deployed immediately beat superior weapons deployed eventually. The Soviets understood this. We should learn from it. Recommendation: study Soviet design philosophy. Consider how simplicity enables mass production. War is won by logistics as much as technology. That lesson appears in US military doctrine manuals by 1955. The philosophy of good enough now versus perfect later. Viktor Morozov never knew his design influenced American military thinking. He died believing his rifle was a brutal expedient, a desperate solution to an impossible problem. He never understood that desperation and genius often create the same results, that the weapon built in haste became the weapon that endured, that simplicity, when executed perfectly, becomes its own form of perfection. Today, in conflicts around the world, PTRD rifles still appear, pulled from forgotten warehouses, cleaned, loaded, fired. 83 years old, still functional, still deadly. A monument to the idea that well-designed simplicity outlasts everything. Viktor Morozov had no engineering degree, no formal training, just 40 years of working steel with his hands. In 22 days, he created a weapon that changed how armies fight. Not through brilliance, through understanding what was actually possible with the tools and time available. Through choosing good enough today over perfect never. Through accepting that war requires weapons that work, not weapons that are beautiful. The PTRD was never beautiful, but it worked. For 83 years and counting, it saved lives, it broke bodies, it forced enemies to adapt, it cost fathers their sons. All of these things are true, all of these things were necessary. All of these things are the price of war. And that's the only metric that ever mattered. To Viktor Morozov, and to Alexei Morozov, and to every craftsman who proved that hands can be as powerful as minds when the stakes are high enough. And to every soldier who carried weapons that hurt them almost as much as they hurt the enemy. And to every father who made impossible choices in impossible times. We remember, we honor. We understand that some victories are inseparable from loss, that some weapons save and destroy in the same act, that war demands prices no one should have to pay. But someone always does. Viktor paid, Alexei paid, Volkov paid, thousands of others paid. They paid so that millions could survive. That is the mathematics of war, ugly, necessary, unforgivable, and true. The PTRD rifle is silent now in museums and storage depots, but the echo of those 22 days still reverberates through 83 years of military history. Some things, when built right, last forever. Even when the cost is measured in broken shoulders and estranged sons and decisions that haunt you until the grave. Especially then, because those are the choices that matter most.